Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, back before a judge. New developments in the corruption trial of local Republican Congressman Duncan Hunter. Plus a victory for the public. The Supreme Court shoots down SDG&E's attempt to pass off multi-million-dollar mistakes to its customers. And mental illness is more common than you might think, but the stigma is tough to break. The campaign bringing awareness. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Good evening. It's Monday, October 7th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Our top story tonight, embattled Congressman Duncan Hunter's corruption case is being pushed back once again. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman was at the federal courthouse for today's ruling.
On his way into court, Hunter would not answer any questions.
Is this a delay tactic?
Hunter and his wife were charged last year with illegally spending more than $250,000 in campaign funds on a lavish personal lifestyle.
Ms. Hunter, have you had a chance to talk to your husband?
Hunter's wife has agreed to cooperate with prosecutors and changed her plea to guilty. The congressman is trying to have the case thrown out on constitutional grounds, arguing that members of Congress are protected from being prosecuted for their legislative activities.
And we appear to be having some technical difficulties with that story. We'll try to bring that to you later on. The White House is trying to fight back tonight after a second whistleblower steps forward, claiming to have first-hand knowledge of alleged wrongdoing by the president. While speaking to reporters, Mr. Trump called any impeachment inquiry against him a scam. Suzanne Malveaux has more from Washington, D.C.
A second whistleblower coming forward, intensifying the accusations President Trump pressured Ukraine to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden and his son. Their attorney telling CNN this whistleblower works in the intelligence community, has first-hand knowledge supporting claims made in the first whistleblower's complaint, and has already been interviewed by the intelligence community inspector general.
People around the president, professionals who are in the Oval Office, who are in the Situation Room, are watching what is happening and are finally saying, my God, this cannot happen anymore, and they are coming forward.
The White House continues to spin, writing in a statement, it doesn't matter how many people decide to call themselves whistleblowers about the same telephone call, a call the president already made public. It doesn't change the fact that he has done nothing wrong. But the White House transcript summary of that call shows President Trump repeatedly pressuring Ukraine's new leader to investigate his rival. Trump feels confident he can survive an impeachment vote if it goes to the Senate.
They have no choice. They have to follow their leadership. And then we'll get it to the Senate and we're going to win. The Republicans have been very unified.
But he's facing harsh criticism from some Republican senators after this.
China should start an investigation into the Bidens.
Senator Susan Collins joining Mitt Romney and Ben Sasse in rebuking the president's comment.
It's completely inappropriate.
Romney taking it a step further, calling the president's China requests brazen, wrong, and appalling, sparking Trump's fury on Twitter, assailing the former GOP presidential nominee's lack of loyalty by writing, the Democrats are lucky that they don't have any Mitt Romney types. They may be lousy politicians, but they stick together.
And that was Suzanne Malveaux reporting. 2 more diplomats will be deposed this week, the U.S. ambassador to the EU and the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, who was ousted in May. Another legal battle is playing out tonight over the president's tax returns. A federal judge this morning ordered President Trump to turn his taxes over to the Manhattan district attorney. But then a U.S. Court of Appeals temporarily stayed that order after Trump's lawyers filed an emergency notice of appeal. The Manhattan investigation centers around whether any laws were broken in New York when hush money payments were made to 2 women who said they had affairs with Trump more than a decade ago. President Trump has denied those allegations. From DACA to guns to abortion to gay rights, the U.S. Supreme Court has a politically volatile docket for its term beginning today. And as KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar tells us, these key rulings will come as the 2020 election campaign kicks into high gear.
It's the first day of the U.S. Supreme Court's new term, and it promises to be one of the most consequential in recent memory.
The Supreme Court is going to be dealing with a wide range of very important issues, from gun rights to abortion to immigration, all kinds of things, freedom of religion.
First up, a look at the federal discrimination law that makes it illegal to discriminate based on sex.
The Supreme Court is going to decide whether the federal employment discrimination law, Title VII, which prohibits discrimination because of sex, includes a prohibition on discrimination because someone is a gay or lesbian.
The court is also expected to hear whether or not the Trump administration's reason for invalidating DACA, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, is constitutional. DACA allows some young undocumented immigrants who were brought by their parents to the U.S. when they were children to remain in the country to work or get an education. The current bench includes 5 justices that were appointed by Republican presidents, 2 of those by President Trump, and 4 by Democratic presidents. But the most explosive case might not even be on the docket: President Trump's impeachment.
Let's take an example from history. The 1974 case involving the Nixon tapes. The Supreme Court, by a vote of 8-0, ultimately held that Nixon had to turn over the tapes. Soon thereafter, he resigned. Who knows if a similar context will come before the court? We're dealing with a different presidency and different facts. What we aren't dealing with that is different is the fact that the Supreme Court is at the very fulcrum of deciding these great and momentous issues of American law.
While the cases will be heard starting tomorrow, most decisions won't be expected until the 2020 election year.
You can expect that whatever the Supreme Court writes will be talked about by a lot of people in this election season, whether the court wants it that way or not.
Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
And today, in one of its first decisions, the High Court denied an SDG&E appeal to have customers pay nearly $400 million in claims from the deadly 2007 wildfires. KPBS science and technology reporter Shalina Chatlani explains what this means for the utility company and its ratepayers.
San Diego Gas and Electric went to the U.S. Supreme Court last year after its argument had been repeatedly rejected by state courts and energy regulators since 2012. The utility argues that the deadly 2007 wildfires, which officials have connected to it, were out of its control, and it shouldn't be on the hook to pay for it, says Maria Severson, the attorney representing customers on this case.
San Diego Gas and Electric. There you had a situation where there's a devastating fire. They had higher costs than just their operations because they had to pay out all these claims from the fire that it caused. But the utility commission found, after hearings and public hearings, it's like a trial, they found that, no, they did not meet the prudent manager standard. They were not prudently managing their operations. They weren't clearing the brush. So who has to pay for that? The innocent customers or the shareholders?
This week, she says the Supreme Court announced it had sided with state regulators who say the utility wasn't acting responsibly.
But the state of the law now is there's a prudent management standard. The Supreme Court of the United States decided it wasn't going to upset that.
And that's a good thing, she says, because the standard holds utilities accountable for safety. But she says state legislators went around that when they swiftly passed a $21 billion wildfire bill this summer.
Essentially, it's going to put customers on the hook. It's trying to break that and move away from that prudent management standard.
The bailout, as she calls it, has customers paying for future wildfires, and Pacific Gas and Electric's bankruptcy from last year's devastating Camp Fire, considered to be the worst in state history. Shalina Chatlani, KPBS News.
The U.S. is pulling troops out of Syria, and tonight some are accusing the Trump administration of turning its back on allies. The abrupt decision overnight by President Trump calls for American troops to pull back from positions in northern Syria ahead of an expected Turkish assault. Syria's Kurds are denouncing the move, saying it risks gains made against the Islamic State. An international rescue committee warns as many as 300,000 people could immediately be driven from their homes in northeast Syria if Turkey launches its offensive. U.S.-Mexico border arrests continued to drop in September. The drop represents a steady decline in arrests since this spring, when the Trump administration struggled to reduce crossings. The nearly 40,000 arrests in September represent the lowest monthly figure this fiscal year. By comparison, there were almost 133,000 arrests in May. According to Border Patrol data, there were slightly more than 850,000 arrests along the southern border in fiscal year 2019. That's more than in any fiscal year since 2007. A new study from San Diego State University finds that stricter border enforcement creates a greater climate for Border Patrol corruption. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler spoke with the San Diego State sociologist behind the study.
It's unclear whether Customs and Border Protection has more or less corruption in its ranks than any other law enforcement agency. But one thing was clear to Dr. David Janchitz when he looked at 11 years of data of CBP misconduct, covering 156 instances. The higher the security at the border, the more likely Border Patrol agents will be complicit with crime.
Smuggling is a very risky business. So for smugglers, it's a very good strategy to try to find officers and develop a relationship with them for a long term. So they can be caught by random inspections, and they want to turn this random element into something more predictable.
Janchitz also found that the length of time an agent has been with CBP changes the type of corruption they engage with. While newer agents more often engage in drug smuggling, which involves simply waving a car through a checkpoint, agents with more experience tend to work with human smugglers. For that, false documents need to be signed and processed. The Trump administration has ordered CBP to staff up in the coming years. Janchitz thinks it's important that CBP continue to monitor new hires well after they've begun the job.
It seems that the first few years are critical, so I think they should focus on the new hires to do more reinvestigation, repeating background checks. So they definitely need more resources on those kind of activities.
In a statement, CBP told KPBS that even after hiring, agents continue to receive training that promotes accountability to the agency's mission. Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.
And now we want to revisit the story on Duncan Hunter's campaign case. It was delayed for a second time today. Here's KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman with the details.
On his way into court, Hunter would not answer any questions.
Is this a delay tactic?
Hunter and his wife were charged last year with illegally spending more than $250,000 in campaign funds on a lavish personal lifestyle.
Ms. Hunter, have you had a chance to talk to your husband?
Hunter's wife has agreed to cooperate with prosecutors and changed her plea to guilty. The congressman is trying to have the case thrown out on constitutional grounds, arguing that members of Congress are protected from being prosecuted for their legislative activities.
The legislative privilege is a real privilege, and I've done a lot of corruption cases, political corruption cases when I was back in New York, and I've done supervised several here. And so it is a real privilege. It's like the attorney-client privilege. So, I mean, you know, legislators take it seriously and they want to challenge it.
But Judge Thomas Whalen dismissed Hunter's motion in July, saying it was wholly without merit. However, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals will now take up the congressman's argument in December.
So Whelan agreed to push the trial back just over a week to January 22nd. Now, this is the second delay in Hunter's trial, which was originally scheduled for September.
Right. I mean, it's just obviously recognizing that the Court of Appeals is going to take some time, or could take some time, in deciding this appeal.
Whelan said he'd like to get the case resolved before the March primary for the sake of Hunter and the voters. Hunter's attorney said they want to keep the trial start date as close to January as possible. But the trial might be delayed again by Hunter, depending on how the Ninth Circuit Court rules on his appeal.
Once the decision comes down, then it's a question of whether or not they apply for certiorari to the Supreme Court, which means the Supreme Court could or could not take the case on appeal.
Recent polling shows that Hunter is running behind other candidates in the race for the 50th district. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Joined by teachers, students, and education leaders, Governor Gavin Newsom signed the largest school construction bond in California history today. The $15 billion bond will now go on the March primary election ballot. Supporters say it will benefit students in preschools, K through 12 public schools, and institutions of higher learning. Local State Senator Tony Atkins says Californians deserve safe schools that are fire and quake resistant and free from mold, lead, and asbestos. Another horse at Southern California's Santa Anita Park is dead, making this the 33rd death at the track in less than a year. The track's owner said the 5-year-old gelding died after a jog on the training track on Saturday. Now, as of now, the exact cause of death is unknown. Santa Anita Park closed for evaluation in March after more than 20 horses died over the course of 3 months. When it reopened later that month, there were numerous changes in how the horses were treated, and over the summer, trainers were investigated to see if they played any role in the string of horse deaths. Mental health advocates are encouraging San Diegans to think about behavioral health this week. As KPBS health reporter Taryn Mento explains, mental illness is more prevalent than people might expect.
Do you want to actually pin one on the wall?
On a San Diego street corner, a pop-up mural asked the public to consider mental illness.
You just go on any side and pin on the black.
Passers-by used ribbons to show solidarity with the roughly 1 in 5 adults who have a diagnosis.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
The painted panels gave visitor Teresa Gedicke a physical example of the invisible condition she knows well.
We actually purposely walked down here for it, support for my son at home.
The Iowa resident's 23-year-old son was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder.
He struggles immensely, and any time that I can provide support in some way of a platform, I'd like to do that.
Advocates hoped art would encourage others to do the same this week. The temporary installation launched National Mental Illness Awareness Week. The campaign aims to end the stigma by reminding the public just how common it is.
So it's all around us at all times.
Catherine Nicario is CEO of the National Alliance on Mental Illness in San Diego. More than 46 million adults have anxiety, depression, or another disorder, but the internal disease can stay hidden. Nicario says simple acts like pinning a ribbon can open the door to important conversations.
And then when you can go home and, like you said, speak to your spouse and say, hey, you know what, we did this today, and maybe you didn't know that I dealt with anxiety most of my life.
Those discussions are crucial to shattering the negative perception. Awareness can boost mental health literacy, but researchers found disclosing a diagnosis can lead to self-acceptance and challenge the stigma.
I like when anybody walks by, takes a picture, or comments on it.
Mural artist and patient advocate Ted Meyer says he hopes his work speaks up for people who aren't ready to talk.
It makes me really happy that I get to tell a patient's story, and those stories make people put the pins on and help raise money, so that's really great.
But it's personal, too.
I've had several friends commit suicide in the last year. I've had a lot of friends dealing with depression.
Gedicke says people dealing with any mental health disorder deserve more help from the system and the public.
There's not enough support. There's not enough medical. There's not enough mental health care. There's just, people are struggling. We're staying on the boardwalk right now, and we're seeing a lot of that. People need help, and they're lonely.
She says some people with mental illness may actually push away their loved ones.
A lot of times they turn away their family and they just want to be left alone because it hurts. And they don't want to bother people.
She saw that in her own son, but with her continued help and assistance from a service, he now lives on his own. She hopes others receive similar support, whether they show they need it or not.
What you see on the outside is not what's going on the inside, and just be careful. People are going through a lot. Everybody's going through a lot. Just be kind.
The mural that caught her eye will go into storage until a future event. But the battle against the mental health stigma goes on. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
And mental health resources are available at NAMISanDiego.org. For immediate help, you can call the Access and Crisis Line. That number is 888-724-7240. It's time to get your flu shot. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommend you get one by the end of October, but especially before Thanksgiving. That's when you are likely to interact with more people, travel, and be exposed to more germs. A number of flu-related deaths have already been reported. To help avoid getting sick, you can wash your hands and avoid those who are already ill. Flu shots are available at many pharmacies and doctors' offices around the country. The California Coastal Commission staff wants Del Mar to make significant changes to its proposed local coastal plan. The document outlines how the city planners deal with rising sea levels and other climate change impacts. The city's local coastal plan involves building up local beaches to reduce flooding and bluff erosion. The Surfrider Foundation supports the 25 amendments Commission staff is asking for.
Hopefully the Commission will have a productive conversation with the folks from Del Mar next week at their hearing to try to figure out ways that some of these 25 amendments can actually work.
City officials rejected the idea of planning for a managed retreat from rising ocean levels. They say the city can't afford to buy back threatened land. The commission wants the plan to include triggers that will force the city to act if certain conditions are met. Several dozen climate activists were arrested or cited during an unruly demonstration today on Wall Street. Many threw fake blood on the Wall Street Bull and on people's clothing as well. The protest was part of a global network of demonstrations known as the Extinction Rebellion, hoping to put pressure on governments to do more about climate change. And nearly 300 people were arrested during a climate change protest in London. The demonstrations were also part of the Extinction Rebellion movement. Organizers plan to spend the next 2 weeks trying to shut down major sites in central London in what they call peaceful protests. Clear skies and warmer temperatures are on the way. Meteorologist Erin Calandra shows us what the week looks like.
Thanks for joining us. We had a beautiful day today all across San Diego County because of this high pressure system. It rotates clockwise, so we have an offshore flow. It's pushing all those clouds back. We're seeing a lot of sunshine. Temperatures are increasing. So you can see in Southern California, not a whole lot of activity as far as precipitation or even clouds. It's going to be clear tonight, 60 degrees for our low temperature. Oceanside at 53 and Ramona 49 for the low. So temperatures overnight are on the cooler side. Mount Laguna at 51 with clear skies. Now tomorrow it's going to be sunny, bright and beautiful. Don't forget those sunglasses. San Diego will reach 76 degrees. Chula Vista also at 76. And Borrego Springs flirting with 100 degrees, coming in at 99 with sunny skies. Now, you'll notice the winds increasing over the next couple of days. Santa Ana winds are picking up again because of this high pressure system. So we expect to see gusty conditions, perhaps not right in San Diego, but those interior areas. We could see some strong winds, which is going to create a fire danger mid to late week. So that is going to be the issue that we will see here across the south central region as we end this work week. Temperature-wise, well, it's getting warmer. We go from the 70s into those 80s Friday into the weekend. And again, expect to see those windy conditions inland. It's getting warmer here as well. Wednesday, 77 degrees, but the rest of the week we are into those 80s with sunny skies. It will be breezy on Wednesday in the mountains. Be careful driving through those passes. Temperatures will drop Thursday to 59 degrees, so a bit cooler with those winds, but we rebound over the weekend into those mid-60s. And in the deserts, temperatures go from 99 all the way down to the 80s, so a lot more comfortable, pleasant conditions with lots of sunshine throughout the week. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Back to you.
And with the hot and dry weather, it's important to stay hydrated. And water usually seems like the most refreshing idea. But in today's Health Minute, as refreshing as water is, it may not be the best choice. Andy Rose explains.
If someone were to ask what's the best drink to keep you hydrated, you and most people would probably answer water. Well, hate to break it to you, but good old H2O may not be the best option. That's according to a study from Scotland's St. Andrews University. Researchers compared the hydration responses of several different drinks and found that, yes, water does a pretty good job, but drinks with low amounts of sugar, fat, or protein do an even better job of keeping the body hydrated for longer periods of time. The study's author and professor, Ronald Maughan, says one reason has to do with how our bodies respond to certain beverages. Consider the volume. The more you drink, the faster the drink empties from your stomach and gets into the bloodstream, where it can dilute the body's fluids and hydrate you. Another contributing factor is a drink's nutrient composition. Researchers tested 13 beverages to see which would keep you hydrated for at least a 4-hour period. The top 5: skim milk, oral rehydration solutions like Pedialyte, full-fat milk, orange juice, and cola. Water and sparkling water ranked 10th and 11th. I'm Andy Rose reporting.
If you, like me, have a hard time carving a jack-o'-lantern for Halloween, you should try doing it underwater. A creative group of scuba divers competed in an annual pumpkin carving contest in the waters off Key Largo, Florida on Saturday. Nearly 24 artists working in teams of 2 used dive knives and carving tools. They were about 30 feet deep near a coral reef. The big challenge? Keeping the naturally buoyant pumpkins from floating away while they carved them. 2 divers from Detroit took first place, and the winners received a free dive trip in Key Largo. As always, you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.